This Sunday's reading is from the book of Luke, chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. This is a parable told by Jesus and is often referred to as the parable of the widow and the unjust judge. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not lose heart. He said, "In a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, 'Grant me justice against my opponent.' For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, 'Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice so that she may not wear me out by continually coming.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them, and yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'"
Thank you. So Josh, our little protagonist in the scenes before the one we just viewed, is playing chess with his grandmaster teacher and is beaten down so badly that chess is really no longer fun for him. Vin, Lawrence Fishburne's character, is coaching him throughout our scene and encouraging him to get back to his roots, so to speak. He tells him to play from the gut. Speed chess is a little different than your run-of-the-mill chess game. Speed chess emphasizes bold, aggressive moves to intimidate your opponent into running, which allows you to control the game. Josh's official teacher knows that if Josh plays this way on the competitive chess circuit, he will lose because his opponents are smarter and more calculating. Josh is taught to play for board control, a style of play better suited to slow chess. But Vin calls him out on this. He says, "You're playing not to lose, Josh. You've got to risk losing. You've got to risk everything. You've got to go to the edge of defeat. That is where you want to be." I remember growing up playing on sports teams and my coaches saying the exact same thing. You have to play to win. You can't play not to lose. And it is occasionally the underdog who has the advantage. For example, a friend of mine recently explained to me that if the Cubs had lost Game 4 this past Tuesday, the series would have gone from the Cubs being up 2-0 to the series being tied at 2-2 going into Game 5, potentially giving the Giants a slight mental advantage. If the Giants lost to the Cubs, they were supposed to anyway. The Cubs were favored. So they had the freedom to just go out and play, whereas the Cubs might be put in a position where they would be playing not to lose as opposed to playing with nothing to lose. Teams playing to win tend to play better than teams playing not to lose. Luckily for us, we didn't have to watch Game 5 because the Cubs put the series to bed in Game 4, advancing to the NLCS. But as I'm sure we'll see moving forward, taking risks can often pay off. The widow in our story this morning is also taking risks. We hear a lot about widows and orphans in the Bible. They are used as the standard representation of the people with the least amount of power. Being without a husband or a father in such a patriarchal society leaves someone in a very vulnerable position. The judge is taking advantage of this position and ruling in favor of her opposition. She is asking for justice, and the judge initially ignores her. The judge is characterized as neither fearing God nor respecting people. A safe conclusion to draw is that he's most likely exclusively operating on bribes. In Israel around this time, generally multiple judges were supposed to serve in each region, and they would keep each other accountable. Here, however, there is just one judge who is free to do as he wishes, and he wishes to take bribes and incur favor with the powerful in the region. The widow in this situation would be expected to lay down and be silent. However, she does the exact opposite. She actively and aggressively pursues her interests. Let's visit the story again. Luke writes, "In a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. And in that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, 'Grant me justice against my opponent.' For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, 'Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so she may not wear me out by continually coming.'" For ancient audiences, this would be hard to swallow. It is hard for us to imagine just how far outside the boundaries of civil society she is operating. For them, a woman, especially a widow, should know her place and be quiet. She is breaking social and gender barriers by acting what many people at this time would see as shameless behavior. But the way in which she goes about these wild actions is actually quite brilliant. The judge operates outside of the bounds of the legal system. By taking bribes, he's no longer playing by the rules. The widow recognizes this. The route we might expect the widow to take would be to hire a lawyer and go through the sort of necessary steps in order to win a court case. But instead, she hounds the judge publicly. Something even modern listeners like us can see as ridiculous. You can't just pester a judge over and over until you get your desired outcome. However, the widow already knows that hiring a lawyer wouldn't do her any good because the judge takes bribes. Vin, our chess player in the park, has something to say about this. He tells Josh, "Never play the board, always the man. You've got to play the man playing the board. Play me. I'm your opponent. You have to beat me, not the board. Beat me." In a perfect justice system, in a slow, controlled game of chess, we can play the board. Working under the ideal conditions, we could try to gain control, but life is rarely this way. The widow realizes that she isn't playing the board, she needs to play her opponent. She has to play the man playing the board. She doesn't have to fix the broken justice system, she has to get the ruling that she wants. She realizes if she publicly pressures the judge, a handful of things will happen. First, he'll get annoyed with her. But more importantly, she ignores the court and makes the issue between her and the judge, makes it personal. The same way the power players in the town deal directly with the judge using backdoor deals. Then perhaps the judge realizes that since this is now public, if he rules in her favor in this singular instance, it will increase his perceived credibility, while he can continue his shady dealings in other cases. Furthermore, this gives him more leverage with the power players in the neighborhood, because now they must offer him more in order to buy him off. The widow has single-handedly created a situation in which not only will the judge ruling in her favor benefit her, but it will benefit him as well. The widow, as Vin puts it, goes to the edge of defeat and wins. Interestingly enough, Luke opens the telling of this parable with the line, "Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart." So for Luke, this is a story about prayer. We think of prayer as more of a sedentary activity, and certainly this style of prayer has its merits. Prayer as reflectively thinking, asking, and listening with God is important, because if we never take the time to listen to God, or anyone else for that matter, who God might be speaking through, then we will never hear what God or those close to us have to say. However, I don't think that we should limit prayer in this way. The widow uses prayer as action. Even the widow, who has very low social standing in the community, has enough agency and power to change her life situation. Prayer cannot simply be sitting with our hands clasped in silence. It must be action-oriented. If we could simply pray for things that God would grant them for us, boy, that would be really nice. I'd probably pray for some weight loss, a Bears win later this afternoon, lavish parties with lots of friends, and I guess I'd probably pray for world peace and an end to gun violence and racism and stuff like that. But that's simply not how prayer works. The widow just doesn't sit and pray for justice. She goes out and she gets it. I can't pray for weight loss. I actually have to eat healthy and work out. I can't just pray for ending racism. I have to point it out when I see it and say something. Near the end of the chess match, Vin says, "Come on, move." And yes, move over and over. We, too, have to move. We have to use our power and our prayer through action in our world. God will be there with us every step of the way, but it is on us to do something and take that step. Josh can't pray for a win. He has to move his pieces. He has to put himself in a position to win. And he has to do it by playing the man, not playing the board. So when this widow, a marginalized person, acts outside of the bounds of social decency for justice, Jesus praises her for it. So what does this look like today? What about when Colin Kaepernick, the NFL quarterback and a member of the historically marginalized black community, kneels during the national anthem? Vince Amlin tackled this very issue in Thursday's UCC Daily Devotional. What Kaepernick and many other NFL players are doing is disturbing my status quo, my sacred Sunday football experience. They're acting outside of what is considered acceptable behavior in the name of justice. Or perhaps when the LGBT community acts just a little too gay for the straight community. Or when a homeless woman steals to eat and to feed her children. Where do we see folks acting outside of what we traditionally see as acceptable behavior in the name of justice? Martin Luther King Jr. was accused by many white pastors who were on his side that he was moving too fast, too far outside of acceptable behavior for whites. Where do we see this in our community? When parents perhaps encourage their high schoolers to take less AP classes to preserve their sanity, or allowing some free time in our children's schedules just to relax. In a culture of celebrating wealth and personal achievement, spending time and money on things like church or outreach activities or volunteering certainly goes against the grain of accumulating more and more prestige and stuff. The difficulty with parables is that there's no right answer. There is no right answer with how far is too far. I think many of us would agree that the race riots we've experienced over the past several years is not the way to go about justice. And yet they also fit the bill as actions outside the norm in the name of justice. But parables have no right answer. Perhaps the NFL pregame is not the ideal stage for a protest, or maybe it is. Perhaps we set apart enough time for things like relaxing and volunteering, or maybe we don't. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with power and choice. We all have power to varying degrees. We all have the power to change our worlds, and God is with us to do it. It often looks messy. It often may be outside the bounds of what we consider decent or civil or popular. It may look on the outside strange or shameless. But that's the beauty of Jesus' teachings. They aren't hard and fast rules. Instead, we are given stories that invite discussion. I don't know exactly how this story can be translated into today's world, but I have some ideas. And I'm sure you probably have some ideas as well. You have power. You are invited to use that power to help usher in the new world where everyone gets justice. But to do that, we've got to move. The tricky part for us is how we are going to use our power to do that. and only you know how to use your power. Vin from the clip at least gives us a starting point. We've got to put ourselves at the edge of defeat, playing the man, playing the board. But the question remains, what will our next move be? Amen.